A furious woman stood in front of a massive iron gate with her arms stretched wide. "You're not getting into this house," she shouted. A tall black man stood quietly on the sidewalk, keys in one hand and grocery bags in the other. "I live here," he replied calmly. "No, you don't," the woman snapped. "I've lived in this neighborhood for 15 years. I know every homeowner here. You're lying." Within seconds, neighbors began gathering. Phones came out. Someone started recording. Another person whispered, "Looks like they caught a burglar." The black man didn't argue. He simply looked at the woman, then at the growing crowd. His expression never changed. But what nobody standing there knew was that within the next 30 minutes, nearly everyone watching would wish they had never opened their mouths. Because the truth wasn't just embarrassing. It was about to destroy someone's entire reputation. Stay with us, because this story proves that sometimes the loudest person in the room knows the least. Marcus Bennett had dreamed about owning a home since he was 12 years old. His mother worked double shifts as a nurse. His father repaired buses for the city. Neither of them had much money, but they taught Marcus one lesson that stayed with him forever. Own something no one can take away from you. Marcus never forgot those words. He earned scholarships, worked nights while attending college, built a successful cybersecurity company from a tiny apartment with one computer and an old folding table. For years, he sacrificed vacations, expensive cars, and luxury clothes. Every extra dollar went into investments. Eventually, he bought the home he had admired for years. A beautiful modern estate, sitting at the end of Oak Ridge Lane. Private, peaceful, exactly what he'd worked for. He'd only moved in 3 days earlier. Most of the neighbors hadn't met him yet. That morning, Marcus had gone grocery shopping. Nothing unusual, just another Saturday, until he returned home. As he pulled into his driveway, he noticed a white SUV parked partially across the entrance. A blonde woman stepped out before he could even turn off the engine. She crossed her arms, her face already filled with suspicion. Marcus rolled down his window. "Excuse me," he said politely. "Could you move your vehicle? I need to get into my driveway." Instead of moving, she laughed. "You almost had me." Marcus blinked. "I'm sorry. Trying to drive into someone else's house? That's bold." Marcus frowned. "This is my house." "No." She smiled confidently. "It isn't." Marcus reached into his pocket and held up his key fob. The gate behind her beeped. The security system recognized the signal. The massive iron gate slowly began opening. For a brief second, the woman looked confused. Then she slammed her hand against the moving gate. "No!" She actually forced the gate to stop. Marcus stared. "What are you doing?" "I'm preventing a crime." The neighbors began walking over. One man folded his arms. Another woman shook her head. Someone whispered, "He must have copied the remote." Another added, "These criminals are getting smarter every year." Marcus couldn't believe what he was hearing. He looked around. Not one person asked him for an explanation. Not one person wondered whether he might actually live there. Their minds had already been made up. Marcus took a slow breath. "I have identification." The blonde woman interrupted immediately. "Fake IDs exist." "I have the deed. Documents can be forged. I can unlock the front door. You've probably broken before." Every answer Marcus gave created another accusation. The crowd grew larger. Children stood on bicycles watching. Dog walkers stopped. More phones appeared. Someone started live streaming. The comments flooded in. "Caught in 4K. Neighborhood hero. Don't let him escape." Marcus noticed people smiling. Some were already celebrating, as though the case had been solved. Without evidence, without questions, without facts. Then came the sentence that changed everything. The woman pointed directly at Marcus. "If you belonged here, where's your family?" The neighborhood suddenly became silent. Marcus looked at her for several long seconds. Then he quietly answered, "My wife passed away 8 months ago." The smiles disappeared. For just a moment, the woman looked uncomfortable. Only for a second. Then she recovered. Nice story. Marcus lowered his eyes. He had spent months trying to rebuild his life after losing the love of his life. Buying this home wasn't just a financial achievement. It was supposed to be a fresh start. Instead, he was standing outside his own gate, being treated like a criminal, just because someone decided he didn't belong. Then the woman did something nobody expected. She pulled out her phone. "I'm calling the police." Marcus nodded. "Please do." His answer caught everyone off guard. There was no panic, no anger, no attempt to leave. He simply stood there waiting. That confidence confused several neighbors. One elderly man quietly asked, "Why isn't he running?" Nobody answered. 10 minutes later, 2 police cruisers arrived. The officers stepped out before they could ask a single question. The blonde woman rushed toward them. "Officer," she pointed dramatically, "this man is trying to break into that house." The officers turned toward Marcus. One rested his hand near his holster. "Sir, step away from the property." Marcus slowly raised both hands. "I'd be happy to cooperate." One officer looked surprised. "You don't seem very worried." Marcus smiled faintly. "Should I be?" The officer frowned. "Do you have proof this house belongs to you?" Marcus reached carefully into his jacket. The crowd leaned forward. Was he finally about to reveal something? Or was the woman right all along? Marcus handed over a simple leather folder. The younger officer opened it. His expression changed immediately. He looked at his partner, then back at Marcus, then once more at the paperwork. His eyebrows slowly lifted. The blonde woman noticed. "What is it?" Neither officer answered. Instead, the senior officer quietly spoke into his radio. "I think we need a supervisor here." The neighborhood froze. Why would they need a supervisor? Over a simple trespassing complaint? The answer would leave everyone speechless. The neighborhood became so quiet that the sound of the police radio crackling seemed louder than ever. Everyone stared at the senior officer. The blonde woman crossed her arms with a confident smile. Finally, she said, "Someone is taking this seriously." Marcus remained silent. He didn't look nervous. He didn't argue. He simply waited. That made several neighbors uncomfortable. One whispered, "If he's innocent, why isn't he saying more?" Another replied, "Maybe he's just good at pretending." The younger officer kept reading the documents inside the leather folder. His expression became more serious with every page. He looked at Marcus. "Sir, how long have you owned this property?" 3 days. The officer nodded slowly. "And you closed through Harrison & Co. Realty?" "Yes." The officer looked back at the paperwork. "It all checks out." The blonde woman laughed. "So what? Anyone can print fake papers." The younger officer didn't answer. Instead, he removed a small card from the folder. It was a state-issued property registration. He typed the number into the patrol car computer. Several seconds passed. Everyone waited. Then the screen displayed the official county records. Owner, Marcus Bennett. The younger officer looked at his partner. "It's registered." The blonde woman's smile disappeared. "There has to be some mistake." The senior officer calmly asked, "Ma'am, do you know the previous owner?" "Of course. We've been neighbors for years. They would never sell to him." Marcus finally looked at her. "What makes you so certain?" She hesitated. "I just know." Marcus said nothing. Sometimes silence makes people reveal more than arguments ever could. Just then, a black luxury sedan slowly turned onto Oak Ridge Lane. It stopped beside the police cruisers. Out stepped an older gentleman, wearing a tailored gray suit. The moment he appeared, Marcus smiled. The man walked directly toward him. "Sorry I'm late," he said. The closing attorney needed one last signature. Several officers recognized him immediately. "Good afternoon, Mr. Harrison." The blonde woman frowned. "You know him?" The officer nodded. "He's the attorney who handled this sale." Mr. Harrison turned toward the officers. Is there a problem? The senior officer explained the situation. Mr. Harrison looked genuinely confused. You mean someone prevented my client from entering his own home? He reached into his briefcase. Without saying another word, he produced the original signed closing documents. Every signature, every seal, every notarized page, everything matched. The senior officer closed the folder. I think that settles ownership. The blonde woman's face turned pale. No, something still isn't right. Marcus looked at her. I've answered every question. May I ask you one? She swallowed. Fine. Marcus spoke calmly. Why were you so determined to stop me before you knew anything about me? She avoided his eyes. I was protecting the neighborhood. Were you? Marcus asked quietly. Or were you protecting something else? The question caught everyone off guard. Several neighbors exchanged confused looks. What does he mean? Marcus reached into his pocket. I didn't want to mention this, but now I think everyone deserves the truth. He pulled out his phone. I installed security cameras a day after I bought the house. The crowd leaned closer. Marcus opened the recording from earlier that morning. The video showed the blonde woman walking onto his property long before he arrived. She wasn't protecting the house. She was inside the front yard, looking through the windows, walking around garage, trying every exterior door. The crowd gasped. One neighbor covered her mouth. Another whispered. What was she doing? Marcus paused the video. Officer, I believe that's called trespassing. The senior officer looked at the footage carefully. Ma'am, were you on this property without permission? She hesitated. I was just... No answer came. The officer asked again. Did you enter this property? Finally, yes. The entire crowd fell silent, but Marcus wasn't finished. He switched to another camera angle. This one had audio. Everyone listened. The blonde woman could clearly be heard talking on her phone. I don't care who bought it. I'm telling you, I'm going to make sure they leave. The neighbors stared at her in disbelief. She continued speaking on the recording. If I make enough trouble, they'll sell. Marcus lowered the phone. I think everyone deserves to know why. The woman looked ready to cry. The senior officer folded his arms. Why? She looked around at all the neighbors, then finally admitted the truth. My brother wanted this house. He made an offer, but someone outbid him. I promised him I'd make the new owner miserable. The neighborhood exploded with shocked whispers. So this wasn't about protecting anyone. You lied to us. You used us. The live stream viewers flooded the comments with outrage. People who had praised her minutes earlier were now condemning her. One elderly neighbor slowly walked toward Marcus. I owe you an apology. I judged you without knowing a single thing about you. Another neighbor nodded. So do I. One by one, the people who had stood against him now lowered their heads. Marcus accepted every apology with quiet grace. Then the senior officer turned toward the blonde woman. Ma'am, based on the evidence, you are being cited for criminal trespassing and filing a false police report. Her eyes widened. What? You can't be serious. I'm the one who called you. The officer replied calmly. And you're also the one who knowingly provided false information. As another officer began explaining the charges, Marcus quietly picked up his grocery bags. He walked toward the gate. This time, no one stood in his way. The gate opened smoothly. Marcus stepped inside. Then he stopped. He turned back toward the crowd. Everyone watched. I spent 20 years working for this home. I expected moving day to be exciting. I never imagined I'd have to prove I belonged. He looked around at every face. You didn't know my name. You didn't know my story. But many of you decided who I was within seconds. No evidence. No questions. Just assumptions. His words hit harder than anyone expected. Several neighbors couldn't even look at him anymore. Marcus smiled gently. But here's the good news. We all get another chance. You can spend the rest of the day judging people or learning who they really are. Without another word, he walked through his front door. The massive wooden door closed softly behind him. Outside, nobody spoke, not because they had nothing to say, but because they had finally realized how quickly assumptions can destroy someone's dignity. Over the following weeks, something remarkable happened. The story spread across social media. Millions watched the video, not because of the argument, but because of Marcus's composure. Companies invited him to speak about leadership. Schools asked him to discuss bias and fairness. Community organizations used the footage as a lesson about making assumptions. As for Oak Ridge Lane, the neighborhood changed. People introduced themselves to new families. Instead of suspicion, there were conversations. Instead of rumors, there were welcomes. Months later, Marcus organized the neighborhood's first community barbecue. Nearly every family attended. Even some of the officers came by to say hello. The street that had once become a stage for humiliation slowly became a place of healing. Because one man refused to answer prejudice with hatred. He answered it with patience, truth, and dignity. And in the end, that proved far more powerful. Because the strongest people aren't the ones who shout the loudest. They're the ones who remain calm long enough for the truth to speak for itself. If this story reminded you that assumptions can hurt innocent people, remember this. Never decide who someone is before you know their story. Character isn't determined by appearance. Truth doesn't need to scream. And justice has a way of arriving right when people think they'll never have to face it.